There are a lot of great things about Total Drama. In fact, why do you guys think it's one of the shows I mainly talk about and look into? And one of the many things to like about the show definitely has to be the character interactions. Though here, I am not talking about interactions in general. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the subcategories of this, that being the couples. Now, there are a lot of good and even awesome couples, though there are some that are not handled or written nearly as well. What's up guys, it's Yamashita Dash Gamer here again, and in this video, I'm going to be explaining my top 5 favorite and least favorite canon relationships in the series. On another note, I do actually have a full ranking list of all the couples, but if I explained all of them in this video, it would take too long. So I just decided to do top and bottom 5. I will show the whole list at the end of the video though, and then if you have any questions about any placements, I will explain it in the comments. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Number 5 worst. Starting off, we have Gwen and Trent, aka Gwent. Now, I don't really dislike this couple, but they do fall more on the boring side at the end of the day, which by itself wouldn't be necessarily a bad thing, but on top of that, they have some moderate to major writing issues. For starters, there's 2 instances where Gwen forgives Trent for something that went wrong in their relationship, but then later on, she's all of a sudden mad at him again. The 2 incidents being when Trent accidentally left her buried alive in Phobia Factor, and then the Search and Do Not Destroy incident. Speaking of which, Trent trusting Heather in Search and Do Not Destroy when she said lies about Gwen, aka the same person she's been treating like dirt all season, was very questionable to say the least. Looking back, I do think he has an at least semi-understandable reason to be iffy on Gwen, given this is the episode right after Gwen was randomly mad at him again for the burying alive incident, but even then, that explanation is tied to bad writing. That being said, Trent does whatever he can to make up for it. They even reconcile at the end of the episode, only for Gwen to be mad at Trent again. Oh yeah, also, this isn't a legit criticism, but Gwen, what kind of kiss is that? Anyways, for some positives, they did have a good build-up and try to get to know each other well as seen in the big sleep. Trent helping Gwen with her challenge in Search and Do Not Destroy before what went down was also pretty great, and so was him helping her in the finale. Though back to negatives, their drama and action was also rather annoying, with Gwen's lack of communication along with Trent becoming quite hard to watch at times. At the least, Trent does own up to his mistakes and even stands up for Gwen. But then again, there was that spiteful question in the finale that I really could have done without. Though hey, at the least they do end on friendly terms, which same cannot be said for another couple I will get to later. And hint, that couple also involves Gwen. Number 5 best. Taking the 5th best spot, we have what in my opinion is the vastly superior main couple in Island. Duncan and Courtney, aka Dunkney. To start off, their dynamic and build-up in Island was godly. Duncan annoying Courtney and them clashing with each other created for some great comedy, along with Courtney's denial of her feelings for Duncan. And I really liked the build-up of them going from kind of feisty to actually warming up to each other. This especially applies to Phobia Factor, where it goes from Duncan pissing Courtney off by scaring her with a hook and continuously teasing her about it, to her warming up to him and even helping him face his fear. Though this does not hold a candle to how they were in Basics training. I can write a whole paragraph on their dynamic and build up just this episode alone, but to put it more simply, their plot and build up here was just all around really cool, creative, and even wholesome. Their goodbye scene at the end of the episode was also really sweet in its own weird way, mainly on Duncan's behalf. On to the Island special, I also think Courtney was made out to look worse than necessary when she left Duncan behind. I mean, it's not like she was going to leave him behind forever. From what I can tell in hindsight, she was just going to claim the prize officially. And if she stayed with Duncan, it's not like it would have helped in any way. Fun fact, if it was just Island Dunkney, it would be my second favorite couple in this series. Heck, even in action when they took a toxic turn, I actually just found them very entertaining for a lot of the part. Plus, there were still moments where they proved to care for each other. On top of that, Courtney helping Duncan convince Harold to vote for Lashana instead of Duncan was a pretty impressive blindside on behalf of both of them. Though on the negative side, there were some moments where it crossed from endearing to just straight up unpleasant, especially with Courtney shoving a diaper in Duncan's mouth, or the whole list. Her hitting him in the Kiwis or them just arguing with each other in general was pretty funny though, and their belligerent sexual tension was quite entertaining. If there's one criticism I especially have with it though, it's how they just reunite in a finale without Duncan actually trying to talk things out with Courtney after how she treated him at times. Not that Duncan was totally blameless even before World Tour though. It was just not a good look for either of them. Duncan for taking Courtney back without really talking things out with her, and Courtney for at least semi getting away with her mistreatment of Duncan up to World Tour. Speaking of which, I also could have done without Duncan cheating on Courtney at the end of the day. Not just because it was wrong and even went against his character in some ways, but also because of the problems it created with a certain other Duncan couple I'll get to, along with a certain other character involved in said couple. Back to positives, their mutual hate feud in World Tour was also pretty entertaining. All in all, Duncan and Courtney is a couple that I really liked while it lasted, but I don't see them getting back together. And yes, as All Stars shows, Duncan eventually had feelings for Courtney again, but even then he clearly had too much pride to actually openly admit it. That being said, I wouldn't mind them reconciling and moving forward as friends, but I think that can only happen after they undergo some good character growth. Something I really hope the new seasons can take care of, should any of the old characters come back. Though I heard at least the first season is not bringing in any old characters back, though I'm talking about the second season or any future seasons after they try a new cast. Number 4 worst. Most other couples on the negative list have the problem of being poorly handled at times, but in the case of Brody and MacArthur from Redonkulous Race, aka Brokarthur, I just simply don't care for it. I don't really have much to say aside from that. I mean, they maybe had some occasional slightly amusing moments, but in terms of build-up, it was rather out of nowhere, and I didn't really find their dynamic all that memorable at the end of the day. Heck, I barely think this even counts as a couple. The only reason I count and rank it as such is because they did have interactions teasing towards them becoming a thing. Also, this is a lot more personal, but I think Brody could do way better than MacArthur. Number 4 best. Next up on the best list, we have Sam and Dakota, aka Sam Coda. Again, I just find the build-up between both of them to be really good. On top of that, it even develops Dakota really well as she goes from being a shallow fame seeker who wanted to be liked by millions of people, to learning the true meaning of love and being liked by mainly one person but on a way more deep level. In terms of chemistry, they also have some stuff in common even aside from being addicted to technology, considering they both are also insecure to a degree and share a desire to be liked by others. Not to mention, there were a couple pretty funny moments with Dakota regarding how she thought of Sam in terms of looks. The moment where Dakota feels insulted when Sam says they have a fair amount in common especially gets me every time. Sam also took a pretty great approach to Dakota. He acted pretty genuine, took things slowly, and was even quite humble, with his one self-deprecation joke revolving around his self-awareness that Dakota isn't very likely to reciprocate his feelings, also being very funny, even if at the end of the day she did. That being said, it is not without some flaws though. For starters, Dakota had a pretty questionable moment where in episode 4, she just leaves Sam in a booby trap she had to make during her stint as an intern. I am also overall not a fan of the Dakota Zoid plot, though that doesn't really drag Dakota down. Sam on the other hand was kind of questionable though. I just wish she at least showed more concern for Dakota going through what she did, instead of mainly just acting happy that she now reminded him of a video game creature. Though at the least, they still thankfully left being happy with each other. All in all, despite some minor missteps, Sam Coda is an awesome couple. Number 3 worst. Duncan and Gwen, aka Gwunkin. Now we're getting into the couples I genuinely dislike as a whole. On an initial note, if I just took their friendship into consideration, they would not be on this list at all, considering I really liked it as a whole. As friends, they really did seem to have a lot of chemistry, but even then it wasn't without at least one misstep, with one I'm referring to regarding Duncan's 9 theory during Beach Blanket Bogus in action. Granted, I actually think Duncan's theory wasn't baseless, considering Trent's 9 obsession popped up around the time he started getting paranoid around Gwen, but he really should have clarified to Gwen that he didn't know much about Trent and that it was just a speculation, and the fact that Gwen actually took it to heart instead of talking it through with Trent wasn't good. Aside from that though, their friendship was very cute. But now onto them as a couple. Simply put, they were very much not well executed. For starters, there's a cheating aspect. Gonna say this now, I don't have as much of a problem with Duncan. I don't exactly expect him to make good decisions or handle things very maturely, and with how Courtney treated Duncan at times, him not feeling bad and even going on to be a dick to her afterwards doesn't annoy me that much. Though he should have been verbally called out for his actions more, and him being hesitant about telling Courtney about kissing Gwen does go against what he said about being straight with people back in Ireland. Though the real problem that especially lies in this is how it affects Gwen as a character. After just learning in a previous season that as long as you're upfront, nothing can come to bite you in the butt. Gwen's words, not mine. She then betrays Courtney. Granted, her kissing Duncan in a moment and being afraid to tell Courtney right afterwards was pretty understandable, but the way she acts after her and Duncan were exposed was really not good, especially considering Courtney didn't really do anything that bad to Gwen before. She basically tries to save her own butt by eliminating Courtney. Admittedly, if she on the other hand quit like she did in action, that would just be pathetic, but I wish she at least apologized to Courtney instead of growing to get rather upset over Courtney rightfully being mad at her. And even though she initially felt bad, the fact her and Duncan just stayed together at the end of World Tour through till All-Stars especially hurts her character. Not to mention there was barely any build up to Duncan having feelings for Gwen. Anyways, then came All-Stars, where it turns out Duncan has feelings for Courtney again. And honestly, the way he handled it was just very pathetic. I get him not wanting to openly admit it, especially to Courtney, but at the least he could have been more honest to Gwen about it instead of the cringe fest we got in Moon Madness. That was him not so subtly trying to get Courtney's attention in front of Gwen. Hell, they couldn't even get the breakup right. Gwen just dumps Duncan really unceremoniously with no explanation, which ends with Duncan displaying a very impressive lack of self-awareness. Also, even though I don't like how Duncan handled things on his end, I also didn't like how Gwen randomly acted cold to Duncan, mainly in episode 2 when he was literally being nothing but nice to her at first. And as far as I'm concerned, Duncan didn't show any signs of having feelings for Courtney again until episode 3. I mean, there was also a scene in episode 1 involving him and Courtney, but I always interpreted it more so as Duncan just trying to still spite her and being shocked he didn't get a reaction out of her. But even if that was a sign of him having feelings for her again, Gwen could have at least communicated with him instead of just randomly treating him poorly. All in all, while the ending was for the better, the way it was executed was also just really pitiful. It's especially sad that Duncan and Gwen couldn't even keep their friendship after the breakup. That being said, they do have some positives. For starters, even though Duncan's feelings for Gwen came very out of left field, they were more adequately explained in the X-Flies after they officially got together. Hell, they even communicated their boundaries when it came to their relationship. Also, while it isn't outright said, Duncan presumably trying to protect Gwen from elimination and picnic at Hanging Dork was pretty cool. Honestly, if it wasn't for how they started, they could have been a very respectable and healthy couple, albeit not as interesting or entertaining as Dunkney. Not to mention, at least in hindsight, I think the love triangle was actually quite enjoyable at times and added some interesting things to the table. Admittedly, not all of it was pleasant to watch or well executed though. As for Gwunkin, I still like it in theory, but execution wise, it did quite a bit more harm than good at the end of the day. Number 3 best. Jasmine and Sean, aka Shazmin. Now, if you've watched some of my ranking videos before, you know that Sean is my favorite character in all of Total Drama, and his romance arc with Jasmine is only one of the many reasons. For starters, they had some pretty great chemistry with each other, considering their common interests in survival and foraging. They also had some pretty cute and even funny interactions with each other, especially with Jasmine thinking Sean was only joking about his zombie obsession and her taking amusement out of that. I can write a whole essay on why Sean is godlike, along with his arc, but simply put, this also plays a part in developing Sean as through mainly some rough patches in him and Jasmine's relationship. He learns to put people over his fear of zombies throughout the season. Him sacrificing himself for Jasmine in episode 9 was especially epic. Not to mention they made for a really good powerhouse duo during the merge. If there is something wrong with it though, I'd mainly say Jasmine's anger towards Sean from episode 5 through 9. In hindsight, I couldn't help but find it rather contrived, considering it really wasn't hard to pass what Sean did off as just him playing the game. Admittedly though, I can kind of understand her being mad since he striked her very hard, but it only softens the blow a bit rather than entirely preventing it from being quite silly at the end of the day, especially considering how long it dragged out. And even if it was because she didn't want to let her feelings get in the way of her performance again, she didn't have to be so hostile to Sean about it. Oh yeah, and the less we talk about her in episode 8, the better. Back to positives though, Jasmine did eventually come around and forgive Sean. On top of that, she even has some decent development regarding her flaws. The second time Sean screwed up, she was once again mad, and this time more understandably so, I'd argue. But despite that, she is quicker to trust him again. For most of the part, Shazmin is an all-around really good storyline that is fun to watch and develops both characters well, especially Sean. Number 2 worst. Next happens to be the other main Pocketail Island couple, and a way more inferior one at that. None other than Sky and Dave, aka Scave. Not gonna lie, they weren't too bad at first. In fact, their dynamic was actually kinda cool. Despite being considered more so the two normal people of their team, they both contrasted each other in some ways, with their levels of social skills being one example I can think of on the top of my head. That and how they reacted to the more wacky contestants around them. Dave was more blunt about it, while Sky, despite also clearly finding them weird, was more polite about it and was willing to give them a lot more of a chance. Though on a side note, Dave did also warm up to a couple of them, namely Ella and Sean. Plus, Sky comforting Dave in episode 2 was a really sweet moment. But then it went uphill in episode 5, at least according to what Dave thought I would say after the first word. Okay, just kidding, it actually went downhill, where Sky tries to tell Dave she isn't ready for a relationship, but when she's on the word but, Dave actually has the audacity to interrupt and tell her he doesn't want to hear it in a moment of very selfish and childish denial. That being said, Sky is barely any better considering she could have told Dave the butt plenty of times, though she somehow blatantly thinks that Dave understands that she just wants to focus on the game and that he can apparently read her mind. This is made even worse by her even trying to kiss him a couple times despite not wanting to date him, and even going as far as to repeatedly deny her feelings for him. Then I think most of us know how things went down in episode 9 in the finale. But I do have a few defenses for both characters I want to put out there again, though I have gone through them before. For starters, as much as Dave went crazy in the finale, and while the fact he interrupted Sky back in episode 5 makes him come off as entitled to a degree, by no means do I think he tried to kill Sky. If he really was trying to kill her, then why did he want to burn the money in front of her? I mean, it would be kind of hard to spite someone after they're dead. As for Sky, on top of being backed in the corner by Chris, there are some canon implications that Keith really wasn't a good boyfriend to her. And if that was the case, it wouldn't fully justify her cheating, but it would at least explain why Sky never wanted to say anything about Keith before. Back to negatives though, it doesn't help that Dave really did seem to become fixated on Sky to an unhealthy degree as time went on. At the end of the day, neither of them are really compatible enough to be in a relationship yet, and I think they would be better off just reconciling as friends. And story-wise, I can see why some people find it pretty interesting, but for me, I just somehow mainly found her drama more so annoying compared to the likes of Duncan and the Love Triangle. Number 2 best. The Goths are overall awesome characters, and how they are as a couple is no different. For Crimson and Annui, aka Crimsui? I don't know, I've never seen a ship name for this before. Anyways, I do not have too much to say in depth, but their dry humor was really funny at times. Probably my favorite moment was when Annui says "ow" in a monotone fashion as usual after he grabs a ticket from a glove of bullet ants in episode 6, then Crimson is like, "Don't be so dramatic." I also love how despite coming off as very edgy, both characters are generally cordial with others, and they are surprisingly really healthy as a couple. This definitely stems from how admirably self-possessed they are as people. Another bit of proof consisting of how badass and challenges they are. On the last note, the bit in I Love Redonkin role of them about to have some development of accepting each other for what they look like under their goth looks was really cool, even if it was interrupted by them seeing a store with accessories they could use to re-goth themselves. Now for my least favorite couple in total drama. Taking the very bottom spot, we have Sierra and Cody, also known as Codiera. And similar to Broke Arthur, this barely even counts as a couple. But again, since there were plenty of interactions pointing towards them becoming a thing, I still count it. Anyways, the fact that a big part of it includes a shtick involving stalking should already mostly explain why I don't like this couple. I don't know about others, but I was overall not a big fan of the whole Sierra stalking Cody gag. In hindsight, I mostly found it annoying and even really gross at times, and the fact that barely anyone cared especially pissed me off. Plus, people have said this before, but just imagine what would happen if the genders were swapped. On top of that, very few things can compare to how much Sierra deeply infuriated me and can't help falling in Louvre, though I have already ranted on her in a previous video. Anyways, for some positives though, it isn't entirely bad from a writing standpoint through further analysis. The stalking gag wasn't without some funny moments there and there, plus there is some clever irony behind it, revolving around Cody wanting to be a ladies' man, only to be uncomfortable, albeit rightfully so, when his wish was fulfilled. Technically speaking, that is. Plus, Sierra was genuinely really sweet to Cody and even saved him from great danger various times. On top of that, she did at least sort of have some growth towards the end, of learning to tone down her obsession of Cody and just accept him as a really good friend. That is, despite still being occasionally questionable on the hot air balloon ride during the episode of her somewhat debatable development. For starters, Cody claims that she pinched his butt at least one point, and when they are in a really dangerous situation, Sierra is like, "Quick, kiss me!" Which shows that she obviously wasn't totally over her obsession of him. And this nicely leads back into some more negatives. The less we talk about her flanderization in All Stars, the better. Worse yet, it's even implied that she is somehow able to creep into Cody's house and even into his bathroom. This is mainly because of this. Yeah, needless to say, the idea of them actually getting together is completely out of the question, and quite frankly, if they actually ever became a thing, I would absolutely flip out and probably grow to dislike Sierra a lot more than I do as of now. Oh yeah, sorry to Sierra fans, but on a last note, I've actually recently grown to mildly dislike her as a whole. And now for my favorite couple in total drama. Now, most couples were just couples, though this couple has the speciality of both being a couple and a rivalry. Well, along with Dunkney. The couple I'm obviously referring to is Alejandro and Heather, aka Alla Heather. Simply put, they are just really interesting and entertaining, both as a rivalry and even a couple. Basically, originally being a very toxic person herself, Heather can immediately see through Alejandro's true colors, and she actually does try to warn people about him, only for people to not believe her and even in some cases continue to praise Alejandro. But underneath all of this, they actually have feelings for each other, and I think chemistry-wise, they are surprisingly adequate too, considering how strategic and game-driven they are. I think they both complement each other very well, and seeing Heather repeatedly deny her feelings for Alejandro with him repeatedly flirting with her was really funny, though Alejandro also had moments of denial, on a side note. And despite them fighting, they showed to genuinely care for each other some moments, and them finally accepting their feelings for each other once and for all after Alejandro got even with Heather during All-Stars was really sweet. And them instantly jumping back to fighting each other when $1 million was on a line was really funny. But even then, we can still see that they genuinely care for each other despite their really competitive nature, and that outside of this, they are surprisingly more healthy. In fact, as a couple, they are what I like to call a more mature version of Dunkney. All in all, their interactions are just done so well all around, and lastly, the fact that it is interlaced with competition and gameplay only makes it even more interesting. On a very last note, there's also this following line on Alejandro's part.
Guess what? I can just turn you on.
Of course you can. You're an expert at turning people off.
Oh.
Wow, roast of the century right there, bruh. And that pretty much wraps up my top 5 favorite and least favorite canon romance arcs in Total Drama. Like I said at the beginning, I did say I would be showing my full list ranking all 19 pairings. Though before that, I would actually like to add a couple more things that I forgot to talk about earlier. And to be completely honest, I'm too lazy to redo the recordings, so I'll just say them here. For starters, with Dunkney, I forgot to mention episode 14 of Action with Duncan's very stupid lack of communication to Courtney. I did go into more detail of that in a previous video of mine, namely my top 20 least favorite episodes, but to put it simply, Courtney was mad at Duncan over an Aftermath show clip that was shown of Duncan and Gwen getting questionably too close to each other for comfort while they were playfully wrestling under the stars, and instead of trying to reassure her like any normal being would, Duncan just gives a really stupid answer, and I guess he forgets to reassure her afterwards. That is, unless Courtney saw his confessional at one point of him being annoyed by her accusations, which her following confessional afterwards actually did have some possible underlying tones of that. But otherwise, it was a very frustratingly poorly written scene. Next up, I also forgot to mention the 2 times Duncan saved Gwen from getting hurt in All-Stars, one being in episode 3 with the leech, then the other when he saves her while she was getting chased by a horde of wild animals, right before one of the 2 infamous Moon Madness Duncan scenes. Anyways, now that that is out of the way, here's my full ranking list of every canon relationship in Total Drama. And as I said before, if you want to know any of my thoughts on the other couples aside from the ones I explained in the video, or if you just want to talk about the ones in the video more, as always, I am open for discussion. Thanks for watching, especially if you made it this far. I hope you enjoyed the video, and this was my first voice recording video, so any feedback would be greatly appreciated. Lastly, if you did like the video, then don't forget to like and subscribe.